A second confession statement has been read out in the High Court in Pretoria as the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial continues. It's detailed how accused number 2, Bongani Ntanzi, was included in the plot to murder the former Bafana Bafana captain.
I received a call from Sifiso Ntuli. He got my number from Muzi. They asked me to come to Basotho Hostel for Slores. I came to the Basotho Hostel and Sifiso called me to the bedroom. In the bedroom it was myself, Sifiso and Muzi. Whilst in the bedroom, Sifiso told me there was a job that evening. Sifiso and Muzi left the hostel. I remained behind and was drinking and chilling with my friends.
All right, let's unpack this with Linda Mnisi, who of course was in the High Court in Pretoria this morning. He joins us live. Linda, good to see you as always. It's getting quite technical, isn't it? If memory serves, I've not had this much insight into the technical details around how confession statements are taken, who's in the room, why these things are all incredibly important. Can you take us through, and that was the voice of Judge Vivian Cronje, take us through why she was on the stand this morning.
All right, so you'll remember that according to the state, Magistrate Vivian Cronje took Bongani Ntanzi's second confession statement. And this confession statement was done in the presence of his lawyer, Ndogozo Mjiako. And in the confession statement, it pretty much sums up what happened in the house and, his alleged involvement in the commission of the murder of Senzo Meyiwa. Just like the previous or the first confession statement that he made before Colonel Rapadu at the Morocco police station, in this particular confession statement, he seemingly goes into the details, Michelle, about what exactly happened and how things happened. What is of particular interest, for me in this particular confession statement is that he then says in his pro forma, this is a form now that deals with his rights before the actual statement is written, he says that he basically wants protection from the people that he committed the crime with, and it's amongst the reasons that he wanted to depose the statement. He goes into detail in the statement about in the house, for example, what happened inside the house. He speaks about a chair that Senzo Meyiwa grabbed a chair, and he goes into detail about the scuffle that ensued inside the house and the involvement of Senzo Meyiwa in that scuffle, the shots that went off, one being the one that also allegedly struck Senzo Meyiwa. But also he further goes on to say he was threatened, he was pointed by a finger, Michelle, to never utter a word about his alleged involvement or the commission of the crime, that is, and says it came from his alleged accomplices. Those threats came from him, and they said should he utter a word, there was a word of profanity that was used in court, that that's what is going to happen to him should he say anything about what happened in that house. He said those threats were directed at him because they could also see that he was scared, he was shivering, and he says that he was young. He was young, and it was the first time that he was involving himself in such a thing. It's important, Michelle, to point out that in these confession statements, what is said and who is implicated really does not matter, because the confession statement can only be used against the deponent. Now, at the center of this is that Bongani Ntanzi implicates himself in the murder of Senzo Meyiwa, and therefore this confession statement, whether he mentions his alleged accomplices, the other accused that are in the box, or he implicates, for example, Kelly Khumalo as the trigger point of this assassination, what remains at the end of the day is the fact that he implicates himself in the alleged involvement of the murder of Senzo Meyiwa.
Yeah, it's great clarity to get from you. Thanks very much for that. Linda Mnisi is live to us there outside court, the High Court in Pretoria there. In fact, let's continue with our discussion on the story and get you some more legal analysis now. Melusi Xulu, it's always a great pleasure talking to you, sir. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. Tell us about the importance of something like reading out confession statements in court in a context where I imagine if I were an accused person, the picture I would like to paint, of course, is of me being sort of a reluctant participant in the crime that is at hand.
Good afternoon to you, Michelle, and to the viewers at home. Thank you for having me. Well, the important thing about the confession, obviously, you must show how you were involved in the commission of the crime. As Mr. Mnisi said, Linda, it does show a difference when the second statement where he's now kind of showing as if he was being threatened after being involved in the commission of the crime. But the important thing is, how was he involved in the commission of the crime as per confession? And whether he made it freely and voluntarily, obviously that has already been ruled over. So now the question is, how was he involved in the commission of the crime? Whether he was being threatened, and that's something that happened after the commission of the crime. But the confession itself is about how was he involved in the alleged crime.
Yeah, yeah. And when the court does listen to these confession statements, Melusi, it's listening to it in the context of other confession statements, right? Of other evidence that's being led in court.
Yes. Remember, Michelle, when the judge or Judge Ratzer spoke about or made a ruling, he said initially that if he caused certain cases, I remember he started with S. He said, as much as the confession is being ruled to be admissible, the court will not make a judgment necessarily on it. It will also listen to other evidence and compare it holistically, I believe. So obviously it's being listened to, but against the other evidence or against other confessions. Because remember, we also have a Melusi Xulu confession, and there's another first confession that Mr. Ntanzi made.
What's your sense, Melusi, listening to what's unfolded in court this morning and up until the lunch break? What's your sense of how the case is progressing? I'm asking because I imagine, you know, for viewers who are following this case, that we are now waiting to get to the meat of the trial, aren't we?
Yeah, my sense is at least everything is unfolding now because of, obviously, for the confessions and the pointing outs, they couldn't be heard in court because the defense was saying, no, this was unconstitutionally obtained, the accused were assaulted. So now we are getting to the meat, as you are saying. We are hearing how this crime was committed. We're also hearing some contradictions. I've been grasping my head over this, Michelle, where you get Bia saying it was Marco and I think Makim Bictelezi who shot Mr. Meyiwa. Then you get Mr. Ntanzi saying it was Carlos who was there with him. So you also get to see some contradictions. But obviously the elephant in the room is about Kelly Khumalo, where everyone is wondering why she's not arrested. My understanding is that obviously you can't use a confession of another accused against another accused. Mm-hmm. But I suppose the state will come and say they don't have enough evidence at this point, and maybe they're waiting for this case to be finalized, and then they'll decide. So, as you are saying, we're getting to the meat, and it's unfolding exactly how it happened. But interestingly enough, there are also some contradictions as you go along.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Melusi, you've touched on exactly what would have been my next question. It really is the elephant in the room, isn't it? The name Kelly Khumalo has now come up several times, and there are questions about whether the state doesn't have enough, or I should rather say police don't have enough to pursue a case against Kelly Khumalo as yet. How do you reckon things will unfold? Will we first have to wait until the outcome of this trial? So we'll have to get to the end of this trial, get a verdict, go to sentencing before any other suspects are pursued?
Well, there is a Zulu saying that we have. It says, "Iqala alboy," meaning, a trial or a crime doesn't expire. So I think at the end of the day, the states must determine whether they have enough evidence to prosecute Kelly Khumalo. And if they don't, obviously they would not want to start a case that has no enough evidence for them to win. But my thinking, and this is a big concern of mine, Michelle, it took about 10 years for us to know that it might happen that Kelly Khumalo is involved. It might happen that she called, I think, accused number 5 or accused number 4. And the question will be, what was done after discovering such, evidence? Because it means the states could have used that and built upon it, but instead you hear that a warrant of arrest was issued, but it was not executed. So it's showing that the state was either too slow to investigate further, or they just felt that they won't be able to get evidence, and that can be concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. Melusi Xulu, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for giving us some analysis and some insight into the court processes. Of course, the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial is continuing in the High Court in Pretoria.